Hello survivors and welcome to Handcrafted Medikit, an alien podcast by Resident Evil fans for Resident Evil fans. This is First Aid Spray bonus episode 18, and in this podcast recording studio nobody can hear us scream as we finally come face to face with one of pop culture's greatest threats in our look back at modern survival horror classic Alien Isolation. I'm your host Cy, and joining me on Sevastopol Station this week, killing droids by bludgeoning, it's KDB aka Kelsey.
Greetings, Earthlings.
Game over, man. Game over. And then game over again. And then game over again. And game over. Crikey, this game is hard. Fire button, Steve Valance.
It's scary how well you know my experience. Hello, everybody.
And after waiting patiently for so long, springing into action from his overmorph with aplomb, it's Moist Owlet, aka James.
Tut, tut.
I learned that word recently. The subject of this bonus episode, like all others, was voted on by our Patreon backers. Support the show now to not only keep us afloat, but also to create new content. Select what that content is and hear it a month before everyone else. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/FA Spray Pod for the full breakdown. Shout out at the top of the show. Usually we will sprinkle in some music with our bonus episodes, but any chance we get to do a First Aid Spray classic and do like a file reading, we will. And Alien Isolation has a ton of, I think what it calls them, text logs. But shout out to Anna Rader for providing the voice of a fairly important background character for the game. Julia Jones, the journalist, she'll be reading a few text logs to break up this discussion. This is the follow-up poll. The winner of the follow-up poll. We did the classic horror films, and then immediately after that, the next one was video games adapted from those films. So, I mean, we won't mention the third one, but the Thing video game was on there, and it did get some votes, but it did lose out to Alien Isolation. It's a subject that we've wanted to cover, I mean, Alien in general, for a long time, of course. Seems like a fun way to start with Alien Isolation. So, the game was developed by Creative Assembly. They'd had no experience at that point with the horror genre. You might know them for RTS titles like Total War, most famously. Sega, who owned Creative Assembly, purchased the rights to the Alien franchise for video games in 2006, which led to the releases of Alien Infestation for DS in 2011. I don't know if anyone's played that, but apparently it's decent, it's a success. And then, of course, the absolute fuss-to-cluck that was Colonial Marines in 2013. The less said about that, the better. But the Alien Isolation team saw the response to that and were excited because they knew their game was kind of more in line with what Alien fans were looking for. Alien Isolation released for Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS4, PS3 on October 7th, 2014. It's been subsequently ported to a strange array of consoles like Linux, Nintendo Switch, which kind of surprises me, and of all things, the iOS, which I actually looked up some videos. It's quite impressive, to be fair.
It's not bad, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. I'd recommend looking it up if you're curious. The original release was praised with decently high scores. Destructoid gave it 8.5, EGM and Eurogamer gave it 8. Some places less so. Polygon 6.5 out of 10, GameSpot 6 out of 10. IGN gave it 5.9 out of 10. And the game received several end-of-year awards. PC Gamer's Game of the Year in 2014, it's quite a good one. Audio Achievement at the British Academy Games Awards, and Best Audio at the Game Developers' Choice Awards. Metacritic scores for those original releases range kind of between 78% to 81%, so pretty good indeed. First place first is our previous experiences with the game. James, for most of this, you're probably going to get to go last, so I can make you squirm. Kelsey, did you play Alien Isolation on release?
Yeah, I played it about a month after it first came out. I actually went to Game to buy, don't judge me, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare on Xbox One.
Nice.
And I was at the till, and the guy was like, "Oh, did you see? We've currently got Alien Isolation for half price." And this was less than 3 weeks after it came out. And I remember being instantly like, "What? Half price?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's a ridiculous bargain, and the game is awesome." So I picked it up for like 22 quid because it was a few quid off of like the highest expense for a game at the time. And yeah, so I got those two games. I think I spent like an hour playing Advanced Warfare and then moved straight into Alien Isolation, which was infinitely better. I remember being pretty blown away, to be honest, but it was a nice bargain pickup for me, really close to launch.
Excellent. Steve, did you play the game at launch? I know you're a fan of the franchise. So.
I did. As listeners may or may not know, I do run or have run a YouTube channel. We did a first look of the first hour, and in that time we did not even encounter the alien because we were going so slowly. It was definitely a launch day pickup, I'm pretty sure, because we were all very oh yeah, alien, it's going to be good, you've seen the trailers. And then we proceeded to go, what are we doing? Where are we going? And people just spent too long faffing around the torrents, just looking around all the time, so we didn't really get very far. After that, it was a not recorded playthrough with my friend Spike, and I had them holding my hand the entire time because I'm a very brave boy, but not this time.
Fair enough. I probably got to it early 2016, maybe late 2015. I don't know. I know I reviewed it for my old YouTube channel. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm not going to get it for this generation of consoles. I want to wait till I've got my Xbox One. I want to enjoy it. I want it to be one of the earliest games that I play on that sort of generation of consoles. So yeah, fairly soon after I got my Xbox One, I jumped on it, and I seem to remember that it was reasonably priced fairly early on. I think it's one of those games that goes on sale quite often. Not all that long ago, it was free on what's the one that's not Steam called? Epic Game Store, wasn't it? So it's one of those games that is quite accessible in that way. So yeah, I have played this from start to finish, but it has been 5, 6 years, 7 years, or whatever now. So James, you played this on launch, I assume. What was that like for you?
Surprisingly, I didn't.
Oh my god!
What?
Yeah. So yeah, I couldn't. Like my PC was really trash back then. So I could play it, but
you didn't
it was
want
not
to.
good.
Yeah.
I wanted the actual the proper experience.
Right. I can relate.
Yeah. So in March of 2016, a whole 2 years.
Wow.
After the game came out, I'm really good at avoiding spoilers. I didn't have the PC. My graphics card and my CPU was absolute trash. But then in 2016 I got a new graphics card, and I immediately played the game for my YouTube channel. And my first playthrough is actually on my YouTube channel of me playing it for the first time in 2016. If folks want to see my first reactions to it, but this game is so unique in every run. I feel like, other than the environments, that each run feels quite new because of the AI of the alien. In fact, I know that even the speedrunning community at one point, and they still do actually, they have a really hard time passing this game and going through it because there's a lot of RNG in it. But yeah, since 2016, I've played this game numerous times on numerous platforms, and on my PC naturally. But this is, again, another surprise. This is only the second time I've completed this game.
Nice. Okay. Interesting. So I, kind of like you, I was in a state where I was I saw it, they revealed it, and I was just I don't really want to see too much of this. I know I want to play it. Out of the Alien franchise, which I've, dipped my toes into bits and pieces. I'm not like other people that, I've not even seen all the films, let's put it that way. But the first film is my favourite, easily. When I saw that Alien Isolation was that kind of alien, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I don't need to know. I don't want to see too much. I just want to experience this properly. And maybe famously, not overly a horror game player, but I was like, yes, I have to experience this because it looks so good. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I played it. Let's start with the gameplay, because I think that's a really important play. And James, you touched on bits and pieces there. It's there's a lot to get into here. I think the most important thing really to talk about is, and we've already mentioned the term, survival horror. Is this or is this not a survival horror game? Steve, you go way back with the genre. Would you define Alien Isolation as a survival horror?
Oh God, you put me on the spot.
I am.
I would say somewhere between a survival horror and an immersive sim, and that's only because of the way that the alien learns and responds to how you play. It's normally an sim is you adapt to the environment, but in this case the environment adapts to you.
Interesting.
But also the way that you have to mete out supplies, there's, instead of ink ribbons, it's like a delayed, not so immediate saving system, and there's save points you're supposed to save anywhere. There is a correlation, but this is obviously a bit more linear than the mansion would be. There's a set route that Ripley has to go.
Right.
So a push, yes, but with caveats.
Yes, that's fair. I see what you're saying. Kelsey, do you have a rebuttal to this? Would you define this as survival horror?
I mean, yeah, I think this was this Alien Isolation kind of went out of its way to re-establish survival horror gameplay, and when it came out, it wasn't really like anything else that was out there or popular at the time. There's so many just action shooters like Destiny and Shadow of Mordor, Call of Duty, obviously, which I've mentioned.
Right, and I mean, even in Alien's case, as I say, this came a year after Colonial Marines, which is just a big shootathon.
Yeah, exactly. And then Resident Evil 6 was a couple of years prior, which, is again had moved away from survival horror. A week after Alien Isolation, The Evil Within came out, but, I might touch on that again later. But, as far as this game goes in survival horror, limited resources, analog save points. There is backtracking, revisiting other areas with new tools, exploring, puzzles, like all those hallmarks of OG survival horror, and then it just kind of turns it up to 11 by dumping the unkillable one-hit death stalker enemy and you're kind of presented with a gameplay experience that feels like classic survival horror, but then in a way that hasn't really been done before thanks to this enemy.
Yeah, it's funny playing this back sort of in the wake now of things like Resident Evil 7. Like, you really feel a strong tie between this and Resident Evil 7.
Definitely.
It's weird. And I would define RE7 as survival horror. So, I think this is... And Steve, I certainly see what you're saying about putting like an asterisk next to it. But Kelsey, all those things you listed is what makes it that for me. And it's one of those mind-boggling things where it's like, how we haven't had more of this kind of thing, just kind of, I don't quite understand how it is.
I mean, I'll get onto this a bit more later, but the fact that we have like so many horror games where you can't interact with the opposition other than hide or die, or it's a shootout, and this is that nice medley between the two with a variety of enemies, it is infuriating that we don't get more of it. Like, we get a million Amnesia clones, and we've got RE7 and this, maybe Village, if you squint. It definitely has its own genre that needs to be filled and fleshed out more.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, I guess the next place to go immediately, since we've all a little bit touched on, is the RNG, the Alien, as a gameplay device. It is perhaps... I don't know if you define it as the core thing, but it's the thing that sells the game, is that you're going to be running and hiding, and as Steve just said, maybe trying to fight off this single xenomorph, who is a one-hit death kill machine. That's sort of like the core loop, even though it does take a little bit of time to get there, and there are parts of the game where it doesn't occur. That's the big selling point. That's the reason when they announced it, I was like, yes, I'm playing it for this reason alone. James, do you want to talk a bit more about how the Alien works and sort of what you think of that system?
Oh, the AI of the Xenomorph itself.
Yeah. Let's get right into the weeds.
Okay. Right, so the AI of this so I played this on hard. I played it on easy, which is when I played it. No, I played it on normal when I initially played it, and I played it on hard in this most recent playthrough. And then like the bits in between, I've always played it on hard, just because I was like, oh, I'll do it this time, but I never did. But yeah, there's a stark difference in terms of the AI gameplay and like how you see it and how it interacts with you when it comes to difficulty. You can tell, like, it's like in normal and easy, you'll hear that ka-chunk of it going up into the vent and down again all the time. Basically, that's your grace period. Except in hard, it does not. It will maybe go into a vent once, and it won't be for long. Like, the AI on this thing in the harder difficulties is pretty brutal. And on top of that, it brings like new mechanics into like when it goes into harder difficulties as well. I know we're not talking about difficulties, but this is the only thing I can connect to.
No, that's fair.
Right now. But yeah, so it does this thing where so the alien makes a lot of noise in the easier difficulties. You always know where it is, kind of, because it's always clacking around and it's like making hissing and sounds, right? But in hard mode, several times I've just turned around a corner, knowing that at one point it was behind me, and it had silently gone around me in like a stairwell or something, right, and had just popped up in a hallway right in front of me. All the time that happened to me during my playthrough, and it was terrifying. And on top of that, it also has a really, really brutal sprint. Not the sprint that it does towards you to kill you, but sometimes it just has a burst of speed, like that it will just do because it might have heard something drop or something, and that's so unpredictable and terrifying. Like the amount of times I've actually watched the Xenomorph kind of bolt, and I've been like, oh, I'm going to stay underneath this table for at least 2 more minutes. Like, it's what, in my opinion, I mean, I know I am biased, and I'll talk about it more a little bit later, but it's the best AI enemy that there's ever been in a video game.
Interesting.
Right, because because it's unpredictable. I think it perfectly houses represents the Xenomorph, right, in terms of what it is, and they somehow put that into AI form. And it blows my mind every time. But yeah, that's what I think about the AI in terms of the gameplay.
So I did a little bit of looking into it to sort of understand what's going on there, and apparently, basically, the way the game works with this is they have the alien AI, and then they essentially have like a director AI, and the director knows what's going on, where everything is, and then basically, depending on different factors, such as the difficulty that you're playing on, and stuff that you may have already done, that the alien has, because one of the selling points was the alien learns what you've done. Like if you use a certain item over and over again, it's going to learn to not be so phased by it or avoid it, not be interested in it. And the director will feed information like that to the alien based on these factors. What's also interesting, as you mentioned there about how it can quickly zip around, is that in most of the levels, there's actually more than one alien moving around. We will only ever encounter one. And the AI, the director AI, will just feed that information to whichever is the most relevant alien model, whichever is the closest or whatever. So there will be moments where you seem like it's behind you and you might turn a corner and suddenly, and it happened to me, even on easy, just came around a corner at me and I was done. Like there was nothing I could do to predict that moment. It was just there. Which isn't helped by this is designed this way on purpose, but the fact that the game gives you this motion tracker thing. And the way it works is it only blips if the alien stops. Is it something like that?
It's when it's moving. It's the other way around.
If it's moving.
That's not what I heard, and that's certainly not what I experienced either. For me, I know I'm already getting into sort of things, negatives a bit. I don't know how I feel about the motion tracker because I didn't feel like it was working half the time because the alien was still getting the jump on me, and it felt a little bit cheap and frustrating. But that's just me.
I didn't use it much in easy and normal, but I'm wondering if there's some tampering done with the motion detector, because when I was playing in hard mode, it saved me a lot. Like I would be, say, in an island in the middle of a hallway, right, and the alien or a synth would be walking by, and I would need that motion detector to know where they are. Right, and it really helped me with those situations. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of trickery done.
It's possible.
Well, not to jump in, but I've done a bit of studying myself and learning that there's a shout out to AI in games. They did like a really good series of videos on this. But the alien, when it's up in the rafters, its model is despawned, but its motion tracker signal is not. And it was terrifying to learn that what I thought was false signals on that motion tracker are actually entirely 100% accurate signals, and the alien is around and it is secure. I thought, it's probably a rat and a duck. No, it's the alien. Like, knowing that it is anywhere and everywhere and almost omnipresent, and the fact that that's got a learning AI in it, and then it's got another AI that's basically tattletaling on you and telling the alien, it's in that room somewhere, go hunt it. It's terrifying that it feels like the game is actually out to coin a word, f*** you, in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get you. I was immediately aware that the blips were also, it could be, anywhere around the rooms, or it could be anywhere like around above me or in some vent, which is terrifying because you can't tell the difference, especially, I assume, in harder difficulties. I've played it in normal and I played it in easy. And to be fair, maybe my issues with the motion tracker come from the fact that on stuff like easy, as James, you mentioned, my ears are just more reliable, right? I can hear the alien more, so that's what I'm listening out for rather than relying on the motion tracker. But maybe that's just me. Kelsey, you're an Xbox fan. Speaking to all of what we just talked about, but also on top of that, do you ever play with a Kinect?
I did never play with the Kinect, sadly, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a whole other factor where if you make too much noise in the room you're sitting in, the alien can be alerted to you, which is just evil, really.
Okay, story time. There was a friend of mine, Aramism Tom, who was streaming Alien Isolation, and he had all of us round to like basically be his backseat support unit. And he has a pet. I can't remember the name. It's a bird. It's a parakeet or something. Buddy. Yeah, Buddy, right? And we taught it how to do the motion tracker beep. So every time that went off, like we taught Buddy to do it. Wow. Tom effectively hates us now because Buddy will occasionally do a motion tracker beep. At least he was doing it that night to the point where they just couldn't play the game anymore because they couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And
incredible.
As a side effect of that, it was setting off his Kinect. We didn't realise at the time, but us laughing was drawing the alien to him. It's brilliant. I love that. It's basically just a microphone that snitches on him. Another bit of information for the alien to feed on. But damn, that's clever. I wish there was more games that did that. Like just wear a headset, so screw yourself while playing the game.
Yeah, Kelsey, what do you think about the sort of AI concept of the alien?
It's like a masterstroke, to be honest. Like the alien, so much AI in games seems really stupid and dumb. There is some really good stuff, but the alien here, it learns, it doubles back on itself, it definitely tries to trick you, and I love that kind of thing. And we've kind of mentioned, though, the research we've done into it. I encourage people to go and watch the YouTube videos where people a lot smarter than me have kind of broken it down really, really in-depthly, and it's just mind-blowing to see how this game works. So I love the AI of the alien. I think it was definitely a risk. For the gameplay in general, they took a few risks, but it's probably, like James says, like you say, is it the best AI? Very possibly. It's definitely the most threatening and intelligent stalker enemy ever in a game. I can't think of a better one. I think Mr. X is close in RE2 remake, but he's kind of easier to get by than the alien. Big fan of it. And it's funny you mentioned the motion tracker because I do know what you're saying. So previously I'd played it and completed it on normal, and this time I played it on easy to try and get through it quicker. I don't think that really helped.
I was going to say, did it make a difference for you?
Not really. But the motion tracker, like as a concept, I do love it, and choosing when to use it and how long for is kind of very immersive, and I prefer that rather than a radar that's on your screen all the time, which I don't like as much, and it just looks cool. It's like a cool piece of kit, but it is a bit fiddly. There's a few things in this game that are a bit fiddly, and the motion tracker sometimes, I thought I was using it correctly, but it seemed to make readings that I was either misinterpreting or were incorrect, and like you say, it seemed to beep at times when it didn't need to beep. I don't know, but maybe at the same time, because it's so much in this game is about that tech from 1979. Maybe it's not supposed to be perfect, and which I also kind of like. So the AI is fantastic.
There are some scripted beeps in the game. Like there are some scripted points in the game where the game's just meant to terrify you and meant to be like, there's something, because you're meant to bring up the motion tracker, and then you see this beep. It happens all the time in this game. You'll see like a dot whiz by you. Right, it's meant to do that. It's meant to put that fear in you. And I can't really tell you because there's so many of them, like what part of the game that is. But I think the game really it splits up. It's like the bit that really helped me on is when you try and trap the alien for the second time just before you get blasted out of the lab. That bit it was working 100%. It saved me. But there was other points where I can see what you guys are saying, where it's it just whizzed by me. I was like, oh no, is it around? But
is it?
They have a lot of scripted points like that in this game.
Is it just nightmare mode where the tracker is half broken and will occasionally glitch out?
Yeah.
That sounds awful.
It's proper 1970s tech that's been hit on a desk about 15 times as opposed to pristine and working.
I agree about from a gameplay perspective about what you were saying about not being a permanent radar on the screen that would have been very banal and whatever. The ability to bring it up whenever you want is really cool, and the fact that you can sort of pull focus and look.
Yeah.
It gives everything a bit of a blur if you're looking at the motion tracker, and then you can pull that to look about you in the motion tracker. It's like, that's very clever, you know, and it feels very, very film-like as well. The general, and obviously we'll talk about this a bit later, but the general way things look in this game is very cool, and the way things have been constructed. All of your items and stuff are, cobbled together 1970s future tech. So the alien learning how to kind of outthink you. The only problem with that is that I've never really encountered it ever at all in my 2 playthroughs, because I never really used any of the items. If you don't do that, it can't get cleverer than you, basically. So here's my hot take number 1, is that for all of the scrounging for items that you do, which is, in theory is a cool part of the survival horror aspect of this game. And I do like the way the crafting system works. We have to commit certain components. It's basically pointless to construct anything that isn't a medipack. Everything else, I couldn't even tell you what most of the choices were. I'd never used a flare outside of the tutorial when it gives you one at the beginning of the game. I think I might have used an EMP mine once, maybe. Most of it's kind of pointless. Your best bet is really just hiding under tables and looking beyond corners carefully. That's about it. Maybe I had a very different experience to everyone else, but I just didn't see the point in most of the tat that it was throwing at me. It didn't. I wasn't interested. Maybe that's just a preference thing. I don't know, but that's what it was.
It may be a difficulty thing, not to be all like, get good.
Oh, absolutely.
But you were on easy and normal.
Yep.
I think those tools become more and more necessary as it goes on.
I expect so.
I think the only thing that was useless to me in hard was the EMP. Because by the time I got to a point where, I wanted to use the EMP, the droids, the synths, were immune to it because they had rubber suits on.
Right. Yeah.
But everything else I used in that game.
Fair enough. Yeah. You're probably right, Steve. You're probably right. But it's a shame that hasn't been adjusted then, that they could have a bit more importance in easier difficulties.
I
also do remember, that when I played it in the earlier difficulties, I also barely used any of the items, but I had to in hard.
I was going to say, EMPs can still double as a noisemaker. I've noticed that pretty much everything can be a noisemaker except for a flare. So if you're desperately trying to find some way of luring, tall, dark, and beautiful away from you, even a flashbang down a corridor would do, assuming he's not aware of it.
The flare, by the way, is for humans.
No, but you can lure it by sight as well. That I have been doing on this recent playthrough, because I was saving my noisemakers for the final encounters. The legit ones. So it was the flare was my, go have a look over there, you big bitey bugger. And to its credit, it did, a handful of times. And then it thought, oh, that's just a flare, I'm not bothered, I think.
KDB, what's your experience with the items?
Yeah, so again, I played it on easy this time as well, and I definitely used items less. But what I will say is I used less of the breadth of the items, but I just used loads of Molotovs. They come in so handy for any enemy, really. And they're you've got to use quite a few items to craft them. I do get what you're saying, though. I don't think I used flares at all in this playthrough. I definitely didn't use noisemakers either, but I did use a ton of Molotovs and a few EMP mines. They do come in handy with the androids before they've got the rubber suits on, like James says. The crafting system is good. I think, as we've mentioned, it just definitely is going to become more useful with the harder difficulties where you've got to make use of it. I did a lot of just legging it on this playthrough, but still died lots, and there were definitely times later in the game where those Molotovs came in very handy, because there's those periods where the alien it goes into the vents for 2 seconds and then just comes back out, and if you're not avoiding it, you have to kind of face it head on. If you haven't got any flamethrower fuel, those items can come in handy. So I wouldn't go as far as saying completely useless, but I agree they are less required on easy, without a doubt.
It's a testament to the game's design, really, that you've got all these tools that can fulfill a purpose, but you don't necessarily need them if you're practical enough and then just being stealthy enough. It's like Metal Gear Solid, isn't it? You have all these guns, but you can no gun, no kill, sneak it if you're that good.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That is a fair point. I'll give you that. Okay, well, I'm not quite sure where to go with gameplay-wise. I'm just going to open it up now and see who wants to take it where they want to go. James, any thoughts on the general gameplay of Alien Isolation?
Yeah, so I initially put down that I thought the gameplay was perfectly okay. But I think that also takes away from like the work they've done in conjunction with the look, atmosphere, and story of this game. Like, I'll talk about the cons, but I am going to big up those cons later on as well, so be prepared. So, yeah, we've been talking about items and stuff, but I'm going to be talking about this as well. So this gameplay isn't groundbreaking in any way, like in terms of how you play the game.
Right.
You know, and in some regards, it can be really frustrating to like find the correct spot on an elevated platform prop to jump up onto it, like, or
right.
Yeah, you're navigating the crafting menu to craft your items, or even your shots missing, even though you had a clear bead on that synth's head, or the random loot drops in specific rooms, which can mean that you're losing out on like one item. Like there'll be one item that you're always low on. However, this brings me on to the pros, because this is all done deliberately. So the awkward movement and the overwhelming crafting menu are ways to instill fear, right? Which is what this game does in spades. I can be there shouting at my monitor because I can't get into a vent, and I can hear the drone getting closer and closer. Your fear is Amanda's fear, and this is true for all the other cons that I just mentioned as well. So the crafting menu is this way because it's wanting you to spend just enough time or not enough time using it. I'm sure all of us here have used the crafting menu while on the run, and it's horrifying. Well, at least I did anyway. It was awful. Normally, I get like running away from synths or humans. Not so much the Xenomorph, because I wasn't going to try that. So yeah, but that crafting menu is something as survival horror lovers we're so used to. We're so used to kind of awkward crafting menus because it's deliberately done that like that. And in terms of like the shots missing, I'm gonna talk a little bit about outside of the game. So Amanda is a very gifted engineer, though at this point she's seen as a mechanic, quote, but she's an engineer. But she isn't a Marine. She has been around a Marine at this point. But she's never been in security. She's held a gun and she's shot a gun, but she's not done it as a job, like at all.
Right.
And she knows her way around it, but she is allowed to miss. And I think they deliberately do that. I missed several times on hard mode, even though I had a bead on that synth's head. It's frustrating, and it's meant to be. Yeah. The other thing I want to touch on, and I think we're all going to have an opinion here on it, and I kind of found it hard where to place this, but that's the pacing of the game,
right?
Like the way you play the game itself. So my opinion has changed for this game, and I'm excited to hear what other folks think about this. But as I said earlier, I've only completed this game twice, but I've started it many times and got to varying levels of completion. The first time I ever played this game, I completed it and felt like it was an incredibly long game, where the dangers, they become more like nuisances, to be honest. And that's fair, but it's also a testament of who you are as a player and who Amanda is, because you're like one person at this point. Like, to help with those Xenos and humans and synths, you're fighting for your life and nothing is standing in your way. You need to get out and escape. And that's basically what the game is, when you first play it, that fear is kind of playing on that. This brings me to my last point, though, and I won't take up this whole thing. But, and it's about pacing. I'm sorry I've spoken so long, but play the game again through its entirety. And I really would, hard is what they intend for you to play the game on. If you look at the difficulty, it says this is what we intend, like the developers intend. But I made a realization just last week when I completed this game. I expected to have beat my previous time by a really long shot. I'm talking like 5-6 hours maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe quicker than that. But I only beat my previous time by an hour. It made me realize that the pacing in this game is actually perfect.
That's a bold claim. A bold claim.
It is. But the game went fast. And I was playing it hard. The pure fear you feel while you play it can manipulate your mind. And I'm sorry about my cat in the background. It can manipulate your mind into just wanting to be out of this hell. Like, you want to be out. That's your mind saying, I'm scared, I want to leave. Not to say that this hard playthrough I did wasn't scary. My Twitch can attest that I did get scared many times, but it was certainly easier the second time round. But yeah, that's my big, bold claim on the podcast.
Before I throw it to someone else, I just wanted to speak on something that you said at the beginning there. That I actually would like to back you up on. That is that a lot of the things you were saying about struggling to climb into a vent or missing shots and stuff, it would be very hypocritical to admonish a game for that when we celebrate other games, like Resident Evil specifically, for things like that, where it's like, well, whether or not it was intentional, XYZ about the game, which makes it more difficult and more stressful, actually adds to the horror of it. So I agree with you in those aspects, actually. We'll talk about length as well as the pacing, but some of the animations are quite long, like taking the braces off the doors, which is obviously something that happens earlier on more than anything else, which they take a long time, which isn't great considering the game is quite long. But it's the same thing where it's like you feel exposed because you can't do anything. The controller's in your hand, there's nothing you can do. You have to wait for this to play out, which is why, like the hacking tool is the way it is, where you have to sit there and you've got this countdown timer and it's all about, the beads of sweat coming down your forehead and stuff like that. So I agree with you on those fronts. In terms of the pacing, Steve, what do you think of these bold claims?
So, famously, the director's cut of the original Alien is actually shorter than the released original film. And I can't help but feel there are some bits you could probably trim from this just to tighten it up a little bit. Case in point, there's right near the end, you're about to leave and get on the shuttle for Verlaine, and then the alien grabs you and shoves you in a hive. That could have probably been processed earlier when you first enter the hive or something like that. And there are various little sections like this where it gets padded out. And I think the one that really sticks out for me is there is a point where you have to get a medical kit for Taylor. Is it Taylor, James?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in San Cristobal.
And, if you're going at pace, she's been bleeding out for about 40 minutes. I can't help but feel there's some fat we could trim there, because you have to not only get into the clinic, you then have to find a key to get into the clinic, and then you need to get an elevator to get to another level of the clinic, and then you have to go get the trauma kit, and then you have to find another way out and then go back around. There are things they could do to tighten that up a bit.
I was literally about to say that I think that is the part of the game that I've written down here. There is a string of objectives which is hilarious to me, which is I can't use the elevator, I'll find a different elevator. This elevator needs a part to fix it. I've got to wake up an android to help me. I need to turn on the power to wake up the android to help me. I need a new tool to turn on the power to help the android help me get the part to fix the elevator to get... It's like, what?
In world and in universe, the way that Amanda interacts and be's an engineer about things, I feel is very authentic to the way she's portrayed in her actions. It just feels like there is an element of disbelief that isn't Taylor like 3 hours dead by now, and stuff like that.
Yes, but more from my issue, that is that this game has at times a really awesome cinematic vibe, and it really does feel like you're playing an alien film. But considering that, I don't know, about 80% of the objectives in this game are turn on the power, kind of broke that feeling for me. I was like, I'm just playing a video game with a long string of objectives. And that is a really extreme example, the one that I just gave there. But a lot of it could have been trimmed down in places for me.
Can I...
but sorry,
I want to backtrack a little bit to the gameplay. And while I think we can all agree the Alien is fantastic and awesome, right? Generally speaking... Sure. I would say that some of the encounters, while they're there obviously to spice the variety up, can be a bit one note. Like, humans is going to go one of two ways. You're going to sneak by them and then the alien's going to come and off them. Or you're going to get into a scrap with them and either they're going to kill you or you're going to kill them or something's going to come and bring the alien in. And it kind of gets a bit too familiar. I wish there was a way they could have made that a bit more varied, because the humans are kind of boring. They'll either like walk a static pattern or shoot at you. That's pretty much all they do. They can be lured with stuff, obviously, but generally if you use like a noisemaker, all you've done is basically ring the dinner bell for the alien anyway.
I was going to say, all you need to do is stand up so they start firing at you and the alien will finish them off for you, which is fun, but,
The most one-sided tag team in history.
If you don't want to make a noise, I was going to say this earlier on. If you don't want to make a noise when the humans are around, because sometimes the xenomorph being down on the ground is, bad, like for everybody. But you throw a flare at those humans, and they're dumb. They have an intelligence of 3, so they will walk over to that flare and go, scratch their head, and then you just throw a Molotov, right? And 5 of those humans are dead.
Yeah, but then the alien shows up, and then it's just the alien encounter again.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying, you can use the flare as a distraction for humans. I mean, the Molotov can make noise, but it means that you're clear then, because all the humans have random patterns. They have I think each human has 5 different paths they do depending on. Actually, it doesn't depend. I think it's just random.
It might be a difficulty thing, but they seem like they're on Metal Gear Solid soldier patrol routes for me. I'm going to just circle around to my final point is that the androids, I think they're amazing, but the side effect is if you have to go and tangle with one, chances are you make that much ruckus that the alien shows up, and then, quite rightly, the alien thinks these plastic men ain't no thing to me, and just ignore them and go straight for you. So the incentive is there to be stealthy, but sometimes the game forces you into you have to fight 8 of these guys at one point, and it's, I don't know, it feels like there could have been some work done there. A little bit to either make it so the alien is definitely not a presence, or that the alien is a presence and will be active all the time. It's the fact that whenever I know I fire a gun, it's literally going to be 3 seconds away. The alien is going to appear, which means I kind of feel limited and hemmed in. It's that Dishonored thing where Dishonored gives you about 400 ways to kill a dude, but incentivizes being stealthy and non-lethal, even though you've got 2 ways of doing it. I feel like there's a bit of a frustration for me.
There are points and. There are points do you mean the bit where you have to get the key and you go through that showroom of synths and you come out and you have to face about 8 of them?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's no alien at that point,
right?
Because you can fire at them, and the game kind of lilts towards that side. There being no xenomorph, it's still difficult, that bit. I
mean, there's also seeks and synthetics. You go through there once or twice, and the alien can roam about and completely mess you up there too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I hate that section.
I mean, it's great as a gameplay variety thing, but also it feels frustrating that I know that my options are limited. It's like having 500 knives, but I need a fork.
Kelsey, what do you make of the pacing of the game, since that's what we sort of dug into there?
Sure. I think it's, to be fair to James, it is a fantastic point that despite there is so much repetition of puzzles and tasks in this game, it is all very close to a real experience. You have to pull out each tool and use each hand. It's, there are times when I'm like, does this animation need to be here? Do I really need to have to do this again? It's like in Red Dead 2, you make a coffee and it's like a labour-intensive experience. But that just ties back into the point of the game. So James is right there. But that being said, they could have just removed 2 missions from the game, and I probably would have felt that the pacing was better. So I don't think the pacing's perfect. I love the fear kind of inducing pacing. I think that's one of the game's main selling points. And then there's these moments of just utter panic and terror that force you to run and hide. And that's good how that mixes it up. But yeah, there is a lot of the same, which can make it frustrating. So I wouldn't go as far as call it perfect pacing. I'm kind of fine with it, to be honest. I just wish they'd done a bit of trimming, like Steve said. And yeah,
so they did a lot of trimming for this game. 14 missions were removed.
Wow!
What? So they've got a sequel ready to go then. I just think there are a couple of missions, and there's points in the game where you're walking for very long periods of time. I've mentioned the spacewalks in the Discord before, and I think they go on just a little bit too long, and it's like, okay, but it is an experience. It's and Steve mentioned it being a sim as well. It's kind of, it verges on that. So I don't hate it. It is part of its selling point, but it's it's a big ask for some people, and that's a part of the gameplay that will, I think, turn some people off. As I said, the game takes risks, and it rarely does anything for you. All of your actions need to be considered, or you'll just end up dead. And the more you play, you kind of get used to it, but yeah, pacing-wise, could have done with some trimming, but all the survival horror stuff is there that I just kind of love, really.
And now, reading text logs from Alien Isolation in character as Julia Jones, Anna Raider, who you can follow on Twitter at Anna_Raider.
September 10th, 2137. Sevastopol, An Outpost of Progress by Julia Jones. Seegson's Frail Origins. After Wayland Industries led the way in faster-than-light travel, Seegson found success mass-producing the flight components central to the colonial gold rush that followed. Its ensuring overexpansion and reputation for producing low-cost alternatives to Y-branded goods is a matter of public record. In the modern day, Seegson is attempting to change the fortunes of alien colonial outposts. Stations like Sevastopol receive investment, and Seegson-afflicted companies set up shop. But the economic patterns that once worked within the Sol system have not flourished in deep space. On Sevastopol, mass-produced no-frill androids still sit in their boxes. Machines and research facilities are still shrouded in the plastic that they were delivered in. Trading docks are only used by the flourishing black market that the station's residents have come to rely on. Sevastopol is a ghost town, and nobody cares.
Steve, any more thoughts on gameplay things, pros and cons?
I feel like I'm being hypercritical. I just want to say I do like this game, guys. Really, I do. I'm trying to be as objective as I can, because it is infuriating when these working Joe automatons are terrifying, awesome, and a great little addition to the lore. And then the second that I get into a confrontation with one, tall, dark, and scary, rips me apart anyway. So it gets frustrating the fourth time in a row. Other than that, I love how it escalates it to a degree, especially when the big reveal is, spoiler, there is more than one alien on the station. The fact that you've not been contending with just the one drone, it's likely been multiple different drones the entire time. And you think you've been safe running around after ejecting said single drone, but you've been making a racket and there's a hive right below you. And then you have to deal with facehuggers, multiple aliens. It's a great escalation of the gameplay, and the fact that the AI accommodates for that. I don't know if both aliens that you encounter at the simultaneous moments are both the same level of intelligence. Certainly feels like that one is a sidekick to a lead, but it's fantastically well done. It's just could do with a little bit of rebalancing, maybe, when it comes to human, alien, android encounters.
Kelsey, any more thoughts on gameplay?
No, I think, as I mentioned, some of it's a bit fiddly, but generally, pure survival horror. Love it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I generally agree. For me, it is a little long. I didn't find that in my first playthrough, but I did in my second one, and maybe that's because I kind of had a deadline of and we need to record it around this time, so maybe that was just on me. It's not really helped by the amount of one-hit kill nonsense, which is often inspired by grappling with another enemy, as Steve's quite rightfully said, and then having to replay entire sections again. But again, that's survival horror, so I can't really complain about it too much. I also feel like I've been down on this game too much. So one little pro is I really, really like the hacking tool. There you go. I really love the way that works. Yes. You have to match the symbols up. It's neat.
How do we feel about the lead up, the build up to it? Do we think it's a strong intro? The gameplay loop of the first 40, 50 minutes. I think. I was going to say, I think it's a bold move, and I would argue maybe not great on replay, but especially this time, I was really into the fact that the alien isn't there immediately. The fact that you get a real big bite of that atmosphere. Replay, sure, it's probably going to be 50 minutes where you have to contend with anything, and that can be a bit tiresome. But the initial run, I feel like they paced it out really well. The intro.
I agree. I agree. They know full well that so many people are going to play this game and just sort of be gawking at the visual design and how well they've... And obviously we'll get to that, but actually next. But, how well they've reflected sort of the film world in the video game. So I'm glad they don't just rush straight into some action, as it were. And all the more the fact that you know what game you're playing. So you are terrified way before that alien shows up. So, yeah, I agree. I really love the slow burn of the beginning of this game. I could have done without the glitch at the very beginning where I had to restart the whole game, where I got to the bridge and it just wouldn't let me continue. That's apparently still a thing. I also related, had a really cool glitch in the worst chapter of the game, most annoying chapter of the game, where all the synths suddenly turn and start hunting the humans down. I couldn't equip any different item. I couldn't change my weapon or to change your medipack. The game just wouldn't let me.
Yeah,
so
that same glitch.
Which is super cool, but other than that, it wasn't too bad. But sorry, that was a random addendum. James, how do you feel about the opening then? Because I know you've got some things to say on it.
Yeah, yeah. So when I first played it, I think everybody, it took me like an hour and a half, 2 hours
Probably.
to get through that section because I was looking everywhere.
Yeah.
I was like, where's the alien? Where is it? They did really well there, and the acting of this show as well. Because it is kind of like you're playing an alien film in itself, but yeah, the acting in this game is sublime as well. So as you're going through this kind of tutorial level, like where it's teaching you here's a gun and here's how to shoot it and here's how you get an event, and it's with storytelling, it's showing you where to go and how to, and that's the way tutorials should be.
Yep.
There shouldn't be a big box on the screen saying press this button, do this, and blah blah blah. It should
if you press the right trigger, Ripley can use the swinging tool to swing it. Press the A button to confirm. Sorry,
it's not like super it's not like all over the screen. It's just like this small little text in the right or left hand corner. It's just like, yeah, this is how you do this, and this is the tool you're going to be using for this specific thing. Yeah, I really like the introduction, especially what they did with Axel. It was just like a really tight little story with him. I mean, we'll get into it later, but it's like, oh, I hate this guy. Oh, okay, he's not that bad. Oh, I love him. And now he's dead. It's like, that's Alien. That's what Alien is. Love that. Yeah, I absolutely adored the introduction to this game.
Okay, let's talk about the way the game looks, the way the game sounds, all of that stuff, and as sort of touched on there, how it reflects the source material. I think if I had to wager a guess, if I had to place a bet on this podcast, any of the little bitching and moaning that we've done, it's largely done with now. I think that we are, 8 years out since this game came out? It still looks stunning. Incredible looking game. The lighting's really good. The settings of the game just... As James, you just said, it took an hour waiting around, worried about the alien looking everywhere. You could spend an hour in every location of this game just looking at everything because there's so much of just dripping off the walls of that alien aesthetic. They nailed it 100%, which is one of my favourite things about it. Is I just love wandering around every location being like, I am in the alien universe 100 million%.
There was a big smile on my face when I first played this game, throughout the entire game, even though I was getting murdered ruthlessly.
I bet. I remember when I played it the first time, I don't know if I finished the game and then went to watch the films, but it doesn't take long before I'm into this game where I'm like, I should just I want to watch all the films now. Like, just being in this universe makes me want to. And the same thing happened this time, where it's like, yeah, probably this weekend I'll watch at least the first film and maybe some other stuff as well. That's what makes the game sing for me, is that love of the source material is so vividly on display. Steve, what are your general thoughts on the way the game looks?
Oh my gosh, right. So, visually, the environments are that right blend of faithful to the film, and it's like, I don't know what you'd call it. Well, let's just say tile set, because Steve's thick. It's got that. It very feels nothing from Jim Cameron's Aliens is here. It's all Ridley Scott's Alien, but in different reinterpretations. And I would say there are some environments that feel maybe they're in danger of being samey, but there is enough environmental storytelling and little touches and environmental details that make it stand apart. And it always feels very authentic. Like there's dust particles almost everywhere on the station that it feels like the atmosphere you could cut with a knife. What's the right term? The color tone and all that stuff. It always feels very much to the film accurate, especially in the flashback scene with Marlowe. You know, where you're going through the derelict ship, and the general atmosphere of boots on the ground. LV-426 is also on point, perfect for the first film rather than the second. I would say its visual strong points are its environments, the alien, the androids, your tools. There's only one small... I've got to be negative in some parts, guys, because I would argue that the character models are a bit whack. The humans are a bit bland.
Sure.
And they're all a bit sweaty for some reason. I guess it's just really hot in space. You know,
I mean, the station's shut down.
Yeah, that's fair. But
you know, and they're right next to a gas giant. You know,
they're all really scared as well. That's what it is.
Samuels and Taylor have just woke up from hypersleep, and they just got a bit of a dab on. You know, it's a bit warm in those hypersleep chambers. Other than that, it's fine. Like the small things. The only other thing I can think of is like the FMV cutscenes. But while very well animated compared to the in-game models, are a bit performance low for the consoles at the time, and even now.
The frames are pretty trash.
Yeah. They could do with, like, if this game ever somehow, Sega, please, for the love of God, like, if this game ever gets a director's cut / remaster, they could do with a bit of love, a bit of touch up, you know, frame rate improvements, and just generally not having, like, screen tearing in pre-rendered FMV. Like, you see, visually, the game has, like, an identity that is consistent and accurate to I don't want to say to a fault, because that seems harsh. You know, that is lovingly faithful to the films. And ran over. So visually, it's very good. Just could do with a bit of performance issues, and models are a bit whack for the humans.
KDB, what's your thought on the way the game looks?
Oh, this is one of the big ones, isn't it? It's the biggest strength of this. I mean, this and the story are the biggest strength of this game. I agree basically with everything Steve said. Just the tangible nature of the environments and everything that's in them. It all feels like stuff that is real, that exists in the real world. It's all enhanced by just some of the best real-time lighting you'll see in a video game. As you said, Si, it's actually pushing 10 years old when you consider the dev time as well.
Yeah,
it's
true.
Like this really is a showcase, and it feels like It fits right in line with the movie. There's no question. It's just such a great achievement, and all that care and love and attention to detail, it's all there. There's like a small bit of asset repetition, but I mean, it feels very corporate in that sense. It's this mass production station thing, so that all makes sense. And then the Sevastopol itself has such like a variety in locations. It's got labs, engineering, living quarters, server rooms, and this just feels... It's insane how good this game looks, and it's colourful. Like Steve said, I don't really like it when horror games are just shrouded in darkness. And although there is darkness in this game, there's plenty of bright reds, yellows, blues, beaming sunlight as well. Those scenes are great. The graphics are really great, and like Steve said, my biggest criticism is those character models. In the cinematic cutscenes, I think, is where they look the worst, which is really strange. The in-game cutscenes, it's kind of not as bad. So in an otherwise like gorgeous games, those models give a bit of a... Humans are hard to do in CG, and we know this, and Creative Assembly aren't a ginormous studio. And it's a bit like, humans weren't our expertise, but I've seen worse. So I don't want to be too down on it. Their proportions are just a little bit off, so I can't hold it against it too much. And the alien model, obviously, we've mentioned, just looks incredible. I played this on Series X, which has an FPS boost, so the gameplay is 60 frames per second, up from 30 frames per second, which it may have been 30 frames per second on the PS5 side, if that's where you played it. And the 60 FPS... is amazing. Even though I don't usually mind cinematic games like this being in 30 FPS, it really just looked amazing, and the chunky CRT-ness of the production design I just personally love that too. So that helps my feelings with how the game looks and all the world building. And to be honest, we could do an entire episode on how the game looks. So I'm going to stop talking about it now, and I'm sure we'll talk about audio and stuff in a bit. But the game looks fantastic.
I need to be greedy.
Yeah,
I need to be greedy. Can I get another point
Go on.
in? Right. I was doing some research on this, obviously, because it's a podcast. You want to be professional, talk about these things. There's a few cutscenes where you look at CRT on the consoles, the Sevastopol Link stuff.
Yeah.
There's one particular one with Lingard, and they had a really cool thing, and I wish they used more of it. They recorded the CG, then they took the CG off, put it through an actual VHS filter, and then put it back into the game. And that effect is chef's kiss. That is some fantastic visual design.
Yep, shines through.
Yep, it's stuff like that, and as you say, just even the fact that they commit to all those CRT style technology and all that stuff, it's super cool. And you're right, arguably, the sort of original Alien aesthetics, obviously a lot of black and obviously a lot of white, sort of off-white. Very easy to make this game boring and monochromatic if you did it wrong. It's not drab at all. I will +1, Steve, what you're saying, if this game ever gets like a full-on, I wouldn't call it a remake, but like a next-gen upgrade, performance enhancements. Also, I'll take a photo mode while you're at it as well, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Come to think of it. We'll do audio afterwards because there's definitely things to say. But James, how do you feel about the visual design of Alien Isolation?
So just quickly, I also want to talk about the optimization of this game.
Sure.
So I upgraded, but I still didn't have a good rig. It was mid-tier at best, right? But even though this game is 8 years old, it was the pinnacle of how it, like, there was no other game that looked this good in 2014. Even in 2016, to be honest, when I started playing this game, I was still blown away. And it was well optimized. Like and this I'm talking from a PC perspective because I'm not sure what it was like on console. But it ran like a dream, other than those cutscenes. But that's not down to how the game runs. That's more about whatever they did with the frames, etc. But that's all I want to say on that, though. Just really stellar optimization, which is something that I think it was starting to peak at that time, optimization for video games, and it's starting to go back down again now. Like, optimization is starting to be second, right? Which I think is something that video game developers need to look into a bit more.
Agreed.
But the real surprise is how this game looks. It looks so good. And I'm going to talk about star of the show for a second, the Xenomorph. Because quickly, we start talking about colors. This game is very neutral. Everything is very neutral, but it still feels poppy.
Yeah.
And there are two camps in terms of the art style that people have when it comes to the Xenomorph. It's either blue and black, the design from Aliens, or it's grey and black, which is tied more to Alien. And in this game, this is another connection to how they're tying this game to the original movie, because it's tied close to Alien. Like, you see that alien, that's the alien from Alien. You know it because of the color palette that they're using. But now in terms of the environments in this game, and I think we've all mentioned it in some way, but the theme is completely unapologetic. in what it puts across. The 80s sci-fi that the original movies had is all there. They could have gone down the route of Prometheus, which only came out 2 years prior, but they stuck to what the source material was all about. This isn't our future, this is an alternate future, and I think that can help people kind of settle into this franchise a little bit more. And I really want people to kind of settle into this franchise so I can have more people to talk to about it. Also, there is just for folks naysayers out there on, well, this is in the future, why is everything not futuristic? There is a very valid reason why the tech is how it is on Sevastopol and elsewhere, and it's and in Alien, and it's all down to cutting corners and creating an oppressive environment for your employees to work, so they barely have any other thought to process in their mind. But I will go over that a little bit later. So we all know, we all know that this is all about, this is all about big corpo kind of just beating down on the employee. To end though, we've mentioned this as well, but I felt every frame of this game is like a photo moment. Sure. Every single frame you can take a screenshot of and it will look good, and I wish there was a photo mode. And there wasn't many games that looked, actually there wasn't any game that looked this good back then that you could have just taken a screenshot at any point. It would have been pretty. The way the filter softens everything, just enough, but not too overbearing, so it looks like you're looking through an Instagram beauty filter. It felt like you were really playing through an Alien movie, and that's all I have to say.
Let's talk audio then. At the top of the show, I mentioned that it won a few awards on audio. Again, similar thing with Resident Evil around this time. Not RE7 necessarily, but Remake 2 obviously won some awards for its audio design. I mean, I don't have a lot necessarily to say this, so I'm going to throw it to you guys largely. But what I do have to say is pretty much just the same thing that I said for the visuals with the music. Again, just the way they've used that original soundtrack and sort of built on it in their own way. It's just another reason for me to go, I want to watch Alien. Doesn't matter how recently I may have seen it. Playing this game just makes me appreciate, the property is in general. Kelsey, how do you feel about the audio, from the music, the voice acting, sound effects, just everything, whatever you want to jump into?
So fun fact about me, I was working at an animation studio in Bath when this game came out, and it was a very stressful job, and I used this soundtrack to calm myself down for a period of about 3 solid months, which is crazy to think when you think what the game is, but there is a lot of calming noises and sound and music in this game, and so it's bonded to me in that sense. So I've got a huge affinity for the soundtrack. It's a superb achievement. Just the way it's used in game is the most kind of natural sounding enemy nearby, danger cues that you'll find in a game, and the way that dynamically changes depending on the situation you're in. It changes without you even realizing it, and that main sort of theme that drops in at key moments, that piece of music I just absolutely love that. And just sound design of the beeping and ticking of the computers and machinery. I think the voice acting's awesome. I think it's incredibly good. We kind of whinged about the character models a bit. The voice actors are amazing. Sounds of the alien, the screeches, the noises in the vents. This is visually and audio wise, it's such an immersive experience. The sound is a huge part of that, and I don't know what else to say too much. Just I love the soundtrack to listen to, but in the game it's one of the kind of it's how it's used for the gameplay, and your experience in the game is one of the better experiences of a video game just ever. There's all these game soundtracks we love that are amazing kind of in a vacuum and stuff like that, but they went to a great deal of effort to make sure the soundtrack was part of the gameplay, and it's so good. I love it.
Yes, agree all around. That alien clambering in and out of the vent noise will haunt me for several more weeks, I'm sure. Did anyone else notice who played the voice of Waits? Speaking of voice actor.
Yes. And his face likeness as well.
Yeah, he did. So for those listening along who might not be aware, is William Hope, who famously played Lieutenant Gorman in Aliens, and I would imagine has shown up in more than just that one film throughout the series' life. You may well know him as well as playing Mikhail from Resident Evil Remake 3. So there you go. Steve, what do you think of the audio design of Isolation?
This is unequivocally the best sounding Alien game ever. And that is not hyperbole. It's a sign of a good horror game, like RE7 and Dead Space, RE2 Remake. This is definitely one where you want the headphones on. Like, this is, musically, it's on point for the Alien film, but the actual atmosphere of the sounds, the just general movement around the ship, it's all very authentic, and I just love /hate the 3D audio, or at least it feels like 3D audio in my headphones, where you can feel the environment around you. It feels very real. Or at least it is when you're immersed in a pitch dark room with the headphones on loud. It's definitely one where you need that kind of experience. Don't just play this through your TV or something like that. Everything, as my colleagues have said, feels very authentic to the film, and I would actually say that it's not a detriment in this case, because sometimes the things can be too slavishly, lovingly close to it. But it's all about the binaurals. When you can hear something down the corridor behind you, and you're physically turning around, that kind of sound design, it's not that frequent, or at least it doesn't feel like that frequent these days in something that's not a Resident Evil title or AAA horror game. They definitely they hit it out of the park.
Yeah, for sure. James, audio, go.
It good.
Awesome.
No, it's music stays faithful to the movies. Very good. I wanted to talk about this in atmosphere because I feel like audio kind of seeps into the atmosphere.
Yeah, let's seep these two sections together. So by all means, we'll kind of bleed these two things into each other.
Yeah. So one thing. So you guys have everything you've said. Like, yeah, amazing. Like this game. There's nothing on par in terms of the audio in this game. But one thing that really hit me was the random use of some audio. Well, seemingly random. But actually, before I talk about that, everything that goes on, by the way, in the game, so like the explosions, thing like fuel injectors popping off, engines exploding, like you hear it as you're playing. Like everything you hear, like it might be a distant like thud, or it might be a massive explosion to your left or to your right. I know that sounds really simple, but it's just that when you're playing it and you had the headphones on, right, and then there's an explosion, and suddenly you'll hear your telecom go off, right, and it's someone saying this just happened. It's like that's a really great use of storytelling with audio. It's like, yeah, I just heard that, and Amanda Ripley will just repeat what you thought. It's like, yeah, I just heard it. What the hell happened? Yeah, just great. I love that, and you guys, I don't really need to go over it, but yeah, the seemingly random audio cues through this game. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there are the big vents you can go into, right? But there are numerous small vents in the game throughout it, and the only one I put down because I didn't want to talk about this forever, but there's one specific one that hit me really hard, piece of audio that came out of one of these vents. Now, people throughout the game, they speak through these vents. You can hear them saying stuff through these vents. You can't do anything about it, and this was one specific one was where somebody was stuck in engineering, and they were waiting for help, and they were screaming, they were asking, and screaming for help down this vent. They speak about others stuck throughout the station as well. But later, of course, we find out that the engineering is ground zero for all this. And as you're going through the hive later on, one of those bodies you find is possibly the person that, because they start talking about their kids, and they start talking about, you can sit there for 2 minutes and just listen to this person. I really wished I could actually speak through that vent as Amanda, but I couldn't. But yeah, those little things, just really great again, I'm saying it a lot, but environmental storytelling that isn't even in a cutscene. And they are rife throughout this game. These little things, even to do with just walking around and hearing the security or Sevastopol residents who are just talking about, their families. They want to get back to their families and stuff. Like, I didn't want to kill security. I didn't want to kill these people because they're just people. And you got that really came out through the audio of the game, and tying into atmosphere. This is probably my strongest, along with story. This is my favorite part of the game, because this game is all about oppression on you and on everybody else. It's pressing on you at all points, whether it be with the narrow hallways, the constant vent sounds throughout the game. Or just random NPCs just sitting, lying around. It was very... Whenever I see these NPCs just sitting and lying around, I got a very Dark Souls-like feel. Like, because they're just given up. They've been beaten down by everything around here. The company and the Xenomorph and everything else. You're constantly reminded of how much this weight that this event has had on these people of Sevastopol as you're going through. Yeah, you hear everything going on, as I just mentioned, like as you crawl through, walk or run through the hallways. And I think a lot of people know this, but the most prevalent thing when it comes to the oppression is that mid-pitch whir sound. It starts about quarter way through the game of a motor, and it's always around you as every camera follows your every movement throughout the game as Weyland Yutani observes their little experiment as you're going through. Yeah, that's all I have to say in terms of atmosphere, because I want you guys to take it away. But yeah, oppression, that's what this game's all about, and the atmosphere, they do so well with it in conjunction with the audio.
Yes, great points all round. I'm going to throw back to something we were talking about earlier to start off. My thoughts on atmosphere is that we're talking about the opening of the game. So you've arrived at the station, dilapidated, no one's about, nothing's really going on. You haven't encountered any enemies. Why would you be worried? You're just investigating this strange situation. You know, as the character, you as the player know what game you've turned on, so you know what's coming. So you press this button to call the tram. You wait for the tram. The music swells. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's no enemies. You haven't seen anyone. You're still weeing your pants. It doesn't matter. It's terrifying. You're only like 15 minutes into the game and nothing's happened. But it's terrifying even at that point, you know, because you know what's to come. And again, speaking to what we said before, Kelsey mentioned this when we were talking about aesthetics, but it's remarkable that for such a long game, and it could be shorter, you could chop some chapters out maybe, but for the number of chapters this game has, the location variety is really good. Especially considering that a lot of the game takes place on this Sevastopol Station. And so, yeah, it's really good to be able to explore a bunch of different locations as you go through the game, all of which have their own different slice of atmosphere. You know, places like the hospital are particularly grim. And then, yeah, the oppression's a great word with the more synth focused areas and stuff like that. And then the spacewalk happens and all that. And of course, a special shout out to the fan service flashback of actually getting to go down, and you basically just get to live out a scene from the film and go and stare into an overmorph. It's cool that they put it in there. It doesn't overstay its welcome for me, and the atmosphere in that section is fantastic. Steve, how do you feel about the atmosphere in Isolation?
It says testament to the sound design, the audio design, that every room has its... Well, not every room, but a lot of the rooms have their own unique identity and feel. Like, some rooms can be just a completely different soundscape in terms of just the way you walk through it, or the way the ambient noise is, that everything feels very interconnected. I don't know how to describe it. It feels like it's a working physical place, and that helps build the atmosphere to the fact that this is a real place that's been compromised. The fan service moments, for me personally, that hive is in my nightmares now. You know, crawling through that damp, dark, wet place, and it feels tangible. Like, in the most weirdly video game way, it feels I mean, that could be to the fact that Ripley's character model moves with a bit more weight than most. Not saying she's fat, internet, calm down. I mean, that she's got like a bit of a delay and a lag in that stopping and starting makes it feel more real. It's... I don't want to say it's flawless, but it definitely feels right. It feels accurate. And like you said, they're going through... I mean, especially the wrecked ship as well. That the corridors feel unique and different to the main ship in terms of the way they sound or the way that they traverse them. It's very well done. Is what I'm saying in my not educated mind. Basically the atmosphere is really good. Is it perfect? No, because some of the corridors can sound a bit the same. Some of them can feel a bit the same, but they're generally dressed up and have their own unique story to tell otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Kelsey, what's your thoughts on the atmosphere?
I'm with all of you. I'm going to be devil's avocado a little bit. So this game has some of the most extended periods of stress of any game I've possibly ever played. And so, as James said, oppression, and as you said, Si, even just, I'll go press the elevator button and stand there. You're terrified, waiting, is something going to come and get me? It takes like 2 minutes for the elevator to arrive or whatever. So it's so drawn out. The atmosphere, like Steve mentioned, lighting and environment and the audio all comes together to create this atmosphere. So you're constantly scared, or at least I was. And is that always a good thing for a game? I don't know. I think as long as you know what you're getting yourself in for, the atmosphere in this game is an experience that's kind of absolutely worth having. And my main takeaway is, I suppose, that all that clever use of sound and lighting and stuff. It always feels like the Alien game, and there aren't many periods where you're not on edge. But is that it can be tiring, and I don't dislike that. I don't know. I just try and work it out in my head. But I've never really been able to play this game for extended periods of time. I think probably an hour and a half is about the most I can put up with, because it's quite affecting. And yeah, I don't know if that's a good way to go. I'm leaning towards yes, just by the way. And in terms of creating the atmosphere, it's just so very special. And, you know, we mentioned playing it with the lights low and headphones on. I think the atmosphere and that this game creates, in fact, is so good that even if I know there's a VR version, even if you're not playing it in VR, it drops you into this world so well and gets you about as close to that experience as VR without putting a headset on. And for me, that is so much credit to this game and what they built through the environments that we've mentioned, the variation environments, the enemies, the sound, the audio, everything is close to perfect, very, very close to perfect, to create a very stressful, very atmospheric experience. And yeah, I personally enjoy it. I could see why it might be a bit much for some people.
Yeah.
There is a period of the game where the alien isn't around, but then the robots are trying to kill you, so it's you know, it's kind
swings
of
and
like,
roundabouts.
Yeah. So
you just gotta duck and dodge, you know.
Yeah. So incredibly stressful, but I like that. I do like to be stressed out. I appreciate that some people don't, but yeah, what an experience the atmosphere is.
Yeah, to kind of back you up as well. I agree that some of the bits can be a little bit long in the tooth when it comes to the stress factor, but at the same time, when you watch me on stream, for instance, and I just remember this feeling now, when you bring that transit in, right, or you get to the marshal's office or whatever, I just, you know, I exhale. I like, you know, I am pleased. I just got through that. I am happy. So there's that, which is like your reward, right? But at the same time, it can be like, I'm of the opinion, and I did this during my first run as well, when it came to the synths, when this came to the synth section, I love that section because I'm literally just parkouring everywhere. Like, and I get to. Like, it's like, oh wow, I just played like 3-4 hours of this game, hiding for my life. Like, and now I can just like, you know, dance through the valleys, you know, and just run through the station, right, without any, you know, well, I mean, a little bit care in the world because there are humans who can shoot at you, until you get to that showroom. But yeah, it's yeah, there are some where I can just. I did feel like my heart was just in my throat at certain points in this game several times. I think that's the intended.
It is, yeah. It definitely is the intention. And like I say, I'm not even really criticizing it. It's just an observation, and I've heard people mention before that. You know, people have called this game too hard. I don't think the game is hard. I think it's just the oppression, like James says. I think that's what that is, and maybe that's what puts some people off.
It's an interesting point, whether or not it's too hard. I mean, it wouldn't be the same game without the one-hit killing alien. Like, it's not. The whole thing falls apart without it. That's the problem. Because I can sort of see the frustration that people might go through with the, I've, you know, been killed again. But yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of part and parcel with the whole thing. But we're getting back. We're kind of spinning our wheels. We get back to that.
The game is also quite kind to you sometimes as well. In fact, I'm sure it's kind to you quite a few times that we don't know about, right? But in terms of several times I've ran to a save point to try and get to the save point, and I know the Xenomorph's around, and I know it heard me, and I can hear it coming. But if you get that save in, if you reload, the Xenomorph's not going to be there.
Yeah. I also appreciate that the save points tell you if there's hostiles nearby, which sometimes is the only way to know for sure how close they are. That wasn't a bad thing, save point. Thank you for the information.
I was just going to say a couple of other things before we move on, because I know we're going to get a story in a bit. And because James talked about optimization earlier, and I just wanted to drop a fun fact. Apparently, the best place, the best platform to play this game on in terms of visuals and how good it looks and optimization is the Nintendo Switch, which is kind of unbelievable. So I recommend everybody go and watch Digital Foundry's tech review, and they almost can't believe they're saying it, but some optimizations were made for the Switch version that, all right, okay, you're on a smaller screen, that some of the lighting and shadows and things like that, it brings this game right up to kind of a level that not many of the other platforms reach. So do check that out. And kind of visual related as well, James, I don't know, you must know this, and the question I had, because as much as I love Alien, I'm not even sure. So with the Xenomorph in this game, they added inverted knees to its legs. Because obviously in the original movie it's a person and it's just like human legs. In here, to help it run, there's an inverted knee, a bit like a dinosaur. Does any of the Xenomorphs have that in the world, or is this unique to Alien Isolation?
No, they're all like that, because that's like the peak running physique that you would need on a Xenomorph. So they put in that research.
So Dog Alien 3 maybe, probably the only one on film, right? But generally in quote-unquote canon, they were all reverse jointed, really.
Yeah, because they're based on insects in a way.
Yeah.
Right, and like mainly ants, but also they bring in like whatever their host is, But yeah, they also strive to evolve and progress and be the perfect organism, as we all know.
Okay,
apparently you need inverted knees to
do that. That's right. That's where we're going wrong.
September 14th, 2137. Sevastopol, An Outpost of Progress by Julia Jones. An Uncertain Future. Seegson has now cut its losses and is set to abandon Sevastopol. This is yet another sign of retrenchment that is rife throughout the sector. Some days it has felt as if corporate pride was the only thing keeping this troubled station in orbit above KG-348. Living aboard this station today, it's abundantly clear that Seegson has gambled wildly with both its own investment and that of banking corps such as Geofund Investor. The ill-judged rush into space colonization, its hubris, and its overexpansion have cost our second-tier corporations dearly. Weyland-Yutani, with its extensive financial and technological firepower, can weather these storms while its lesser rivals fall away. Even the company, however, must hear alarm bells ringing as it looks towards these fading orbital outposts. Wise ongoing investment in terraforming research technology looks increasingly shrewd as it watches each of these distant lights blink out.
So the game is set in 2137, which makes it 15 years after the events of the original film. Starring, we've kind of touched on a lot of this as we've gone through it, but Amanda Ripley, who's the main character. She's the daughter of Ellen, as played by Sigourney Weaver in the movies. At this point, Ripley from the films is, I guess, floating through space, right? So for a very long time, and so her daughter has grown up without her, and always curious about that. She is informed that the flight recorder of the Nostromo, Ellen's previous ship, has been found. It is now stored on Sevastopol Station, and so Amanda, alongside Samuels, who's a android supplied by Weyland-Yutani, go to retrieve it so that she can kind of find her own closure. But all things then, of course, go terribly wrong on the station. Or in fact, they already have gone terribly wrong, to be more appropriate. So let's, I guess, just dive into what we think of the story, characterization, that kind of stuff. Not necessarily, but also included how you feel about it as part of the Alien canon, if you like. Steve, let's start with you. How do you feel about the story of Alien Isolation plot?
The general build-up is nice, especially at the start. I love the fact that Amanda feels like the closest we're going to get to Ethan Winters in space, and that's not a negative, because I like Ethan. Remember, podcast listener, very relatable, despite the fact that such a stressful situation is going on. It always feels like she's on the same wavelength, because I'm normally scared out of my wits too. A little bit. The only issue I really have when it comes to voice acting is the what's the name? Taylor, is it? They seem very monotonal compared to everybody else. Marlowe, for example, seems very on the point, accurate about the situation, very stressed and very tired. Waits, again, very tight. There's a lot of fatigue in this game, now I think about it. Is it Ricardo, the young chap who takes over after Waits dies? Generally feel bad for him. And the way that they're portrayed.
Rip Cardo.
Yeah, Rip Ricardo. The characters definitely build a decent story to get attached to. Well, it just feels like, unfortunately, when it comes to Ripley, she gets, like, basically goes in, tries to find closure about her mother, gets denied said closure, goes through the worst engineer's nightmare, gets a little payoff on the Dora James. Yep. And then she's basically living out the end of the Alien film. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just feels like Ripley's kind of being forced into a situation where she has to both get a little bit of character development, and then she's living out a horror movie, and then she gets a little bit more character development, and then the horror movie finishes. But it's a really good horror movie, so I'm going to allow it.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny that you say Ethan Winters, because arguably you could say that maybe Amanda is...
Yeah. Ethan's Amanda Ripley.
Yeah. She's lacking maybe a little bit of personality, but I kind of like that because it's a first-person perspective game and you're kind of in a little bit of an avatar. She's got, some spunk, she reacts to things in the way that you'd like.
It's those quiet, understated like when she says something like that. And
yes. I love the stuff like that for sure. So yeah, I could see both sides of maybe there's some complaints that she's no patch on Ellen, but of course not. She's not going to be afforded that kind of time, or it's not really that perspective. So it totally works for me.
I can give a bit of perspective in terms of like how she reacts and stuff and what her personality's like. So while I played the game, I was also reading the novel. Naturally, I've read this. I think I've read the novel more than I've actually played the game. But she's had it rough, guys. Yeah. Like she's like her life has been nothing but people effing her over constantly. Like she has been constantly trying to search for her. Well, first she had to struggle to get out of a childhood household, which was a real struggle. Then it was her being a poor person trying to get into a good school because she was a gifted mechanic/engineer. And then her life was basically people coming to her saying, because she's famous at this point, semi-famous. Weyland-Yutani has plastered her all over, saying that we're trying to find your mother. They're using her as basically a mouthpiece, even without her consent. She takes no money from Weyland-Yutani, even though it's sitting there in a bank. And people keep coming up to her and saying, I found information about your mum. I found information about your mum over years and years. And every single one has led to her being betrayed in some way. And then she got her own back. And then she learnt that to keep her mouth shut, basically. Because the longer you keep your mouth shut when you're speaking to con artists, the longer they're going to try and trip over themselves.
Right.
That's the way she kind of thinks. So the way she conveys herself in Alien Isolation is a perfect kind of representation of that. Right at the beginning, you get a really good representation of that with Samuels. Her saying to Samuels, that she will go is a huge deal. Because she had had so many people, especially from a Weyland-Yutani executive. But he proved himself to her. So that's why she's kind of like this. Just to for people who do feel she doesn't have personality, a bit more context to her character. But I'll get more into like who she is later on, because this is the beginning of her story, pretty much.
For sure, it's cool that they used her character, which was just kind of like a hanging question mark in the Alien canon for a long time. And you're right, just that opening cutscene, the fact that she doesn't immediately jump at the offer, it kind of sets the stage quite well. So it's sort of suspicious and stuff like that. For me, the major story point that I just wanted to point out, just how much I appreciate, is the inclusion of Siegson, and Sevastopol as a station is super clever, because it's taking something that we know about the universe from the films with the synthetics and the droids, and finding a way to spin that in a fashion that works for a video game. Siegson are kind of like this failed competitor to Weyland-Yutani trying to make discount droid models. That's why they're not all that clever, and they all look like, generic Robo-Men, and as opposed to the
Blue
synths
Man
of the yeah something like that. Grey Man Group.
So I have a little bit of insight into the synths, into the Seegson, just quickly.
Sure.
So the Seegson droids were made like that. I mean, there's the cheap parts and everything. That's fair. But during this time, and I think we can all relate to this, especially with AI talk recently, but people were very uncomfortable with how Weyland-Yutani and Hyperdyne, in particular, were making synthetics to look like us. People were very, very uncomfortable with that. So Seegson is why they were successful for the small amount of time they were, because they made these droids that looked very droid-like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, that's why they're like that.
I wonder.
There you go. Even more appreciation for it in that sense. But yeah, it's just a great way to come up with, this is how we can insert another kind of enemy into the game that just ties so perfectly into that established lore. In terms of the general story, I don't really have any criticisms. I'm not going to scream about it from the rooftops. It works very well. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't amazing, but it's good. It's definitely serviceable, and it works in terms of the full package. Nothing about it put me off by any means. I'm not complaining. KDB, what do you think of the plot of Alien Isolation?
I'm gonna go to bat for it, to be honest.
Cool, good.
I think this film. Well, first, I just want to say to listeners, like, I'm campaigning for James to talk about this stuff at length, and hopefully we hear more of that in future, because this context is obviously awesome. But for me, the game uses like plot threads and notes from the first couple of movies, which is cool. With the first one taking precedent. But for me, this story about wanting closure, which you mentioned, Si, that underlying motive of Amanda kind of searching for her mother, like, that is where I latch on. And not to be hyperbolic, but, that kind of emotional human story for me is more affecting to me than the story of the original movie. And I love the original movie. It's a perfect film. It's possibly my favourite film of all time. And one day we're going to talk about that, I think. But this is a character-driven sequel, and poor Amanda Ripley is just essentially manipulated by Weyland-Yutani, and they think she'll probably die sniffing around here, and that'll be their problem done and dusted with. And she's caught up in this plan to capture the alien, and I just feel so sorry for her the entire time. And the AI problem it brings up, which I love. Robots are all well and good, but once they have directives, they do whatever it takes to follow them, and even if that means killing all the humans that are a threat to the directive. And I think the Joes are an inspired kind of choice for that, and because they just look so like anti-human and emotionless. So to have loads of them around is really super creepy, and great for the world building, like you mentioned, Si. It does get a little bit kind of fantastical. The latter parts of the game, there is maybe one too many explosions and giant drifting ships, and it comes dangerously close to kind of being a bit too chaotic. I think Amanda survives like 7 falls and 10 explosions in this game, but it manages to keep its grasp and retain the horror and emotion. And there's just 2 key moments in particular I want to talk about, where after a very long game, things get absolutely nailed again, and the story for me retains its footing. And the first one is the message from her mother, and just the way that creeps up on you is kind of this huge kind of slap upside the head. And for me, I've played the game twice now, cried both times I heard it, and it just stops me dead in my tracks. And my connection with that first movie might be a big part of that. And for me, it's one of the most emotional moments in gaming, and it's literally a black screen with a waveform on it. And this is a credit to Sigourney Weaver's delivery, this kind of touching, affirming monologue she gives, and she says, my sweetheart, and getting a lump in my throat already just thinking about it. And it feels like when you hear that, it's like, wow, my mum had to blow her ship up, I might not make it out of this. And it's an incredibly powerful moment in the story for me. And the next one is when, spoilers, when Ricardo dies. It's like this big blow where I thought, okay, he was going to make it out of here. And it centers it back onto Ripley in the finale, and she's very much on her own. And I'm so glad Steve mentioned Ethan Winters, because I've got that in my notes as well. And I felt more like I was assuming the role of Amanda Ripley more than I did Ethan Winters in RE7, which we kind of know was that game's intention. And that shadow of Weyland-Yutani and this kind of, gives Umbrella a run for its money, this corporate conspiracy. You never actually see the guy in suit or, guy in sunglasses, but I think it works having them a part of the story because it's just that constant sense of conspiracy and odds being stacked against the protagonist. And I'm not a Weyland-Yutani apologist, but their ruthlessness is kind of like something I really, really love. Just one final thing, I'll wrap it up. My only kind of real complaint, and I think, was it Steve potentially touched on it, is the ending is a bit... It kind of verges on cliffhanger, and after this lengthy story, which was about closure, you don't get as much closure as I would have liked. And the floating Ripley, maybe we could have had a little time jump, waking up in a med bay, someone from Yutani's there, I don't know. I feel like it's missing a final cutscene. But that being said, it hits so many good notes for me. Needs a bit of trimming, but that emotional family stuff, corporate conspiracy, killer robots, huge thumbs up for me.
Do you know what? I think some of my lukewarm feelings about it probably come from my issues with what I was saying about this constant string of video game objectives getting in its own way a little bit. But what you're saying there about it being the character-driven sequel, and the way it ties a bunch of stuff up and the way it ties itself into a bunch of other things. I'll tell you what, here's a bold one for you perhaps. This is a better sequel to Alien than Aliens is.
It is.
So, there you go.
It is. I agree.
Cool. Right, James, let's throw it to you. Story and any more lore bits and pieces that you want to sprinkle in.
Haven't you gone? Did you want to go? Or have you already gone?
I'm good.
I don't know.
That's me. That's me said. I've now taken the lid off. You can now expel.
Are you sure?
I'll just sit back for 20 minutes, shall I?
So to call on what Kelsey said earlier on about there not being, like a Wesker-esque character or like a big corpo dude, because there always is. Like Carter J. Berg, for instance, and in a way Gorman. By proxy, there is in this game, and his name's Ransom, but you never see him. He's in all of the logs. He's constantly threatening people like Lingard and Waits and like all these people. And Foster and the Anisadora. He's always threatening them and doing that like corpo thing. And also get me more paper clips. He's just an all-around not nice person. But yeah, that's your guy. Like if you need another enemy, like another bad guy, because he's in there. He just takes a little bit of digging.
Is he the rolled up newspaper guy? In the offices, the main offices.
I'm not sure.
Okay, because
I thought he got.
I was going to say there's a film nod, isn't there, where the bit where Ash was trying to kill Ripley with the newspaper. Someone's actually been killed by one that way.
Yeah, I was like, oh, then here's your reference to the first Alien.
Yeah, amidst all these other ones.
It's even, before I go into the story, there's even like a point right at the beginning of the game where I was taking a tour around the Anisadora. I was like, and here's where Ash stuffed a magazine down Ripley's throat for some reason. We don't know why. Because they even speak about in the game and in the novel, they talk about like the sorry, not the Anisadora, the Torrens. The Torrens is like almost a carbon copy of what their living quarters in the Nostromo. That's what you saw. Anyway, first of all, this isn't a controversial opinion. I don't think within the alien community, but people might raise an eyebrow outside of it, but this game is the springboard to a new revival of the Alien franchise. It happened 8 years ago, and we had a little bit of no time like after this. Like there was literally nothing that was released for like that of any substance for about 4 years until after this game. And this is all due to reinstating Ellen Ripley's daughter as the new hero of this story. And Disney, calling you out, Disney, you need to be brave and you need to grab this plot if you want to progress the franchise, or else
100%.
I feel like everything they put forward, if they just make up stuff, it's just going to fall flat because it needs to be connected to the original lore. So Amanda Ripley, I'm going to be talking about some out of game stuff here because it's going to kind of go into what I'm going to talk about later. But so Amanda Ripley, she spacewalked into unknown territory. She fought an army of people, synthetics, aliens, to find her mother because she knew, and that's important, she knew she was alive. And I know we know that she knew at the end of the game, but even beforehand she knew. And according to the Alien Isolation novel, she knew she was in cryosleep before she found out in the game. And before I go into the story of that, this is incredible because several early and modern comics, novels, and audio dramas, which are now considered canon, talk about something called dreamers. It's a career where certain individuals can extend their unconscious self to consciousnesses, which is a hard word to say, elsewhere. They don't affect the consciousness in any way, but they sense what is around and is on the minds. Think of what a non-lucid dream is like. You see everything around you and the mood that you're in, or the mood of the vessel you're in. It is fairly uncontrolled, though, and not targeted. I know that sounds all really wild, but it's going to help me explain the next section. So I'm not going to go too deep, but basically the Ripley family are the first bloodline who has the ability to empathically link with other beings. Which is why Amanda Ripley knows her mother is alive. And why Ellen Ripley non-verbally communicates with the alien queen in Aliens, in the second movie. The I know they're out there somewhere trope is used a lot, and to be honest, it's really tired and I'm fed up of it. But this freshens it up and fits the theme of Alien with evolution and progress, no matter what. So that kind of fills in some gaps that people might have, like, oh, why is she doing this? Why is she putting herself at danger? Why is she trusting these people? Because she knows her mum is alive, and she wants to meet her mum again because her mum is everything to her.
Should have been like 5,
she lost
something like that, right? Very young.
She was very young. She lost her mum. Went off on this trip, and Ellen didn't want to go. She did not want to go, but she had to because they need money. And again, this universe is oppressive. They needed this money to survive. Her other parent was just not a very nice person. They were, I don't want to go into it, but they were just not very nice. But with all that said, the story of Alien Isolation, with all of that previously said, all of like the story of Alien Isolation might make a bit more sense. It's not just a regular family member searching for another purely due to hope, although Amanda would have thought it was that because this is an early onset of empathic link. The story of Alien Isolation hits the same beats that every Alien movie and piece of Alien media does. It tends to come in 5 acts. You get the introduction, the discovery, the horror, then there's a grace period, and then there's the real final act, which is why I love the Alien franchise, because they always had that little twist at the end. And Alien Isolation keeps those same story beats, kind of. You get your introduction to the space station and its inhabitants and a really immersive tutorial level, which we spoke about earlier on. There's a discovery that the Anesidora came from LV-426, and Marlowe's wife became the Patient Zero, who you see in the op room in San Cristobal, which makes sense why the alien is around there, because that's where it came from.
Yep.
Then we get the horror, which is pretty prevalent throughout the game, to be honest. Then there's that grace period of the alien being shot into KG-348 and maybe the end being in sight until you get the real final act of there being a hive and a queen that we don't see in the engineering section, which ends in you running for your life and escaping. Within all these story beats are also tinier examples, which is also something I love about this game. They're tinier examples of all of these acts within every few missions. Which is why, like, it feels samey sometimes, because you're getting all of these acts in every 3 to 4 missions, basically. Then there's the vaguity of the story, which was also dealt with really well. The Alien universe itself is very vague, deliberately, only giving you morsels to try and bite on. I remember folks arguing for like a full year on the internet about if there was an alien queen in Alien Isolation until Will Porter, the writer of Alien Isolation, confirmed that there was a queen there, but she was unseen. And they did that to keep the survival horror aspect of the game, or else it would have ruined kind of the pacing of like having a big boss fight.
Right.
Yeah. I love that decision, and in my opinion, that truly makes this a surviving a horror game rather than becoming a survival horror and then a shoot 'em up, which survival horrors tend to become. It made sense, it also made sense due to how rapid the Hive developed Ovomorphs, which Sai has got pretty intimate with recently.
Yeah, intimate. I don't know if I use that one.
So they take a lot more time to develop. And for those that don't know, Ovomorphs are basically, they can be created by any kind of xenomorph. They use a human, well, not necessarily human, but they use a host to create an egg where a chest burster, or rather a facehugger, will spawn. And there is theories that they will always spawn a queen facehugger, which is one of the big buggers. It's the one that's in Alien 3. I think it's in some of the deleted scenes. I think it might be in Director's Cut. But yeah, there's like a buttload of eggs, so that must have been done by the queen. I also have a link here if you want to link that to people, to that interview. So the game is really nail-biting up until the very end for me. And this is going to be... I know I haven't really put a ton of cons into this game, but the end where you're forced to do a QTE.
Oh, yeah.
And on hard, guys, the button pressings are really narrow. I had to do it about 5-6 times, and the rest of the game is like really immersive, and even if you die, like there's different approaches every time, but there's only one approach here. And it really took me out of the immersive experience of that the game has been given to me for the rest of the experience. But yeah, when I did this first playthrough, we didn't get anything in terms of story or anything when it came to the Alien for Alien for another year when I played it in 2016 until Alien Covenant, and we know how that went. It didn't go very well, even though I kind of like Covenant the more I watch it.
Same.
But in 2018, we started getting quality after quality stuff following Amanda, following Alien Isolation. So we brought up like what happened to her after the Alien Isolation. Like we saw that there was a spotlight that glided over her, and she was picked up. She was rescued. We're not sure by who at the moment. I don't think it's probably going to be important to the story. But she got picked up and she got sent to a place called Mendel Station. And then her next adventures began, which I'm not going to go into.
Alien Blackout, James.
Yes, Mendel Station. Yeah, with Blackout. Oh. And then there's the comics, there's Zula Hendrix, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes after that. And I don't know whether I should spoil the new book that came out. Do you think I should?
Probably not.
Okay, I won't spoil it. But there's some pretty like illuminating stuff in the new book, Alien Colony War, which you should all go read if you can give it a go. I love this story. As I said at the beginning, it springboards the Alien franchise itself. Amanda Ripley herself is the new hero. She needs to be the focus. I'm seeing a lot of artists and authors. They are starting to basically wander off from the Ripley timeline, and they're basically bringing new people in, new characters in that have no correlation to it. I think that's the wrong way to go.
All right.
You were given this amazing gift of Alien Isolation, and
don't
all
squander
of this
it, basically.
Exactly, all of this deep content. Exactly, yeah. Don't throw it away. It needs to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I completely know exactly what you mean by that, which is why I said don't spoil the book, because I know there's plenty of Alien fans out there listening. Obviously, the crossover is huge with Resident Evil, and anyone that may have played Alien Isolation on the lead up to this podcast, or listening to it, or decides to on the back of this podcast, may well be interested in following the story of Amanda from here on out, because hopefully, like you say, that plays a big part in the future of the Alien series in general. James mentioned an interview there. I'll put that in the description of the podcast if you want to learn more about the backstory and the story and stuff of Alien Isolation. Cool. Should we move on to final conclusions then and wrap this baby up? Cool. Kelsey, let's start with you. What are your final thoughts on Alien Isolation?
Alien Isolation, I think, might be responsible, well, as James has said, responsible for saving the Alien franchise. Yeah, I think he's right. But it's also just kind of responsible for saving, or at least refreshing, the horror genre, and in particular survival horror. Just before this game came out, the PT demo was released, and that in itself was kind of a glimpse of the potential for horror games to kind of once again become mainstream. And we don't know how far along PT was, or if a finished product was ever going to be any good, but what we did get is Alien Isolation. And a week after Alien Isolation came out, we got The Evil Within. Please see our previous discussion on that for context. But my point is, horror games are not really in a good place. And from a personal perspective, I hadn't really been scared by a horror game, maybe since Dead Space in 2008. But even that game didn't really touch the heights of terror that I got from, the original Resident Evils and Silent Hill. And Alien Isolation changed all that, and for the first time in a long time I was very scared playing a video game, both at launch and here playing it again. We've talked about the atmosphere, the sound, the lighting, the environment it puts you in, the xenomorph that's better than any Alien game ever made. All fantastic. Gameplay has a few fiddly moments. It's a little bit too long for me. They could have trimmed a mission or two, but And that stuff, it doesn't harm the experience too much. It can be a little self-indulgent in that respect, but I think outside of that, this is still a pretty unique gaming experience, even in 2022, and it doesn't try to cater to mainstream popularity of games, but what it does do is it set out to make an Alien game that best captured the feelings, the style, tone of that original classic movie, and it without question does that. So if you're a fan of the movie, you're probably going to love the game. If you're not a fan of the movie, it's possible the game isn't for you. But I do encourage anybody who's not played it in either case to give it a try, because Alien Isolation is an important gaming experience. And I think if it wasn't for Creative Assembly and the risks they took here, all out of love for Alien, then we may not have got, so many other games, RE7, RE8, Dead by Daylight, Phasmophobia. Just horror games are more popular now, possibly, than they've ever been. And I think we have Alien Isolation to thank for a lot of that. So I love the game. I do believe it is verging on some kind of very important cultural kind of art piece. It's not a masterpiece, but I admire its purity.
Steve, what are your thoughts on Alien Isolation?
Yeah, I feel like I'm probably the most negative on this podcast, so hear me out and say this is easily the best licensed game we've had on First Day Space so far for me. I think it's definitely out of the horror game pantheon, it's probably the licensed title to sit among them. I would argue this is definitely, it deserves its seat at the table alongside your Silent Hill 2s, your Resident Evil 4s, your Resident Evil 7s and whatnot. It may not be the best at the table, but it certainly isn't getting dirty looks. It's not perfect. There are some janky animations. There are some pacing issues, but it's definitely crafted with love. And I would argue that every time you see a working Joe in any other Alien piece of media after this, it's because of this game. It's left a legacy, whether it be Amanda Ripley herself or in the way it was designed. I mean, I can fully attest to stuff that is in this has had bigger impact on game design than I think it's been given credit for. It's full 3D sound, the way the AI of the alien works is novel and very well encoded, and arguably much more impressive than any Stalker enemy ever. Maybe to its detriment, but maybe not. It depends how much you can take it. If you're not an Alien fan, I'd say your mileage may vary. If you're an Alien fan, you've probably already played it, so why are you listening to this podcast? But if you haven't, for whatever reason, play it. It's better than PT, by the way. I just wanted to shout that out. I know KDB mentioned that earlier. PT gets way too much fan service and way too much love. Alien Isolation deserves that love. Doesn't it, Sega?
Yeah, big words. I'm inclined to agree with a lot of what you guys have said. I thought I was going to be the really grumpy one coming in here with my issues, but the discussion has definitely brought me around a little bit. It is a hugely important game. I haven't played a lot of the many Alien games, but talking about Isolation taking its seat at the table with the horror big boys, either way, I would wager its quality. It doesn't deserve to sit at the table with the rest of the Alien games. This is the single most important Alien game, I'm going to guess. It certainly feels like it. Beloved by fans, and as we've all said, beloved by the people that made it. You can feel that. It comes across completely. If you don't like Alien, I still think you actually would enjoy this game. It might be, we talked about the length. The length would probably be a problem if you don't like Alien necessarily, but there's a lot to love about that incredible AI and the wonderful atmosphere and world it creates and stuff like that. You guys have pretty much put the nail on the head, I think. It's just desserts, really, considering the games that have followed in its stead. It's a shame that it doesn't get talked about quite as much as it should. Or even the fact that it didn't get any real video game follow-ups. I guess at the end of the day, most people would rather just look at 2013's Colonial Marines and point and laugh than actually appreciate something good, which is probably a bigger, wider discussion, really, isn't it, about human nature. But sod you, Colonial Marines. It seems to have cast a strange shadow over the wonder that is Alien Isolation. As I said, I don't play a huge amount of horror games, but those I have played, I can count on my fingers the ones that have truly affected me in that way, where it's, I think we said it before about RE7. I don't want to play it anymore. I'm too scared, but also I can't stop. And my first go through with Alien Isolation was very much that feeling for a lot of it. So yeah, big fan indeed. James, close us up. Final thoughts, Alien Isolation.
I promise this won't be long.
In four words.
I mean, there's 4 words at the end.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I thought I was going to be pretty scathing of this game. And I thought that the pacing was going to be the thing that was going to bring it down for me. I thought that was going to overshadow all the good that is in this game. But having that second run that I had, especially as a diehard fan of Amanda Ripley in particular, and after reading all I've read in the past 5-6 years, it's recolored this entire game for me.
Excellent.
In my eyes, and with my experience in survival horror games, which is now pretty vast now I think about it, didn't used to be, it is the best survival horror game there's ever been. It keeps to the truest sense of surviving a horror that I've ever had the pleasure of playing. And I thank Creative Assembly and the community of the Alien fandom for helping in creating it, because Creative Assembly themselves basically used AVP, which I've linked to you, and a lot of other sites and wikis basically as a reference. It was a labor of love for them. They truly took on everything the fans said, which is why this game is so good. So the world of Alien Isolation, it has reflections of our own in it, except it's exaggerated, but in a different sense. And it's why it resonates with me so much. I don't want to speak for other people, but Amanda Ripley and myself, we've also had incredibly similar upbringings. And to see her overcome such adversities over and over again, even if it's fiction, is something I look up to. Long live Amanda Ripley.
Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors and our Patreons once again. Support the show for as little as $1 a month to help us create more bonus content like this one over at patreon.com/FASprayPod. You can also join the Discord server to get in touch with members of the team and our community, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's recorded. You can find a link to the server as well as our Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, etc. at FASprayPod.com. And also you can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a review where you can. It helps spread the word. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Cyniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. James is at Moist Owl at OFF. And Kelsey is at K_D_B_. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. I think it's funny that multiple of us were like, oh, I feel like I'm going to be really horrible, or I feel like I have been really horrible to this game. And then when we get to the conclusions, everyone's like, it's the best f***ing thing since sliced bread.
I mean, all complaints aside, my 4-word review is, where's the sequel? Like...
Right! How can that be?